Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 12 of Pumpin Iron, the review series for the classic muscle cars of GT6. And in this episode we're featuring quite an interesting car. It's something of a cult favourite. From what I understand, not all that many were produced, and it's significantly different to many of the other cars in this series in a couple of ways. For one thing, it's quite a bit newer than most of the other muscle cars here, which tend to be from the 60s and 70s generally. But also, this car's engine is completely different to pretty much any other muscle car in the game. For two main reasons. One is its size. Most muscle cars, especially the classics, tend to have very large capacity engines, usually about 5.7 litres minimum, anywhere up to 7, 7.2, 7.5, etc. This car's only a 3.8 litre, which is pretty small by muscle car standards. The second way in which this car differentiates itself from the crowd is that most other classic muscle cars are supercharged. This car, however, is turbocharged, kind of like the Oldsmobile or the Red Devil, so it's in quite an exclusive group on Gran Turismo. Small capacity, turbocharged muscle car. Now, compound that with the fact that it only weighs 1,286 kilos, and it doesn't really sound like a muscle car at all. It's got a small capacity, turbocharged engine, and it's lightweight. That does not sound like you're describing a muscle car. And that's actually one of the best things about the GNX. It's not your average muscle car. It may not have the biggest engine, or necessarily the most power, but it is something of a sleeper car that makes a fantastic track machine. Now, the PP isn't particularly high on this model. It's 564 fully tuned, and it's the most competitive, I would say, anywhere between 475 up to about 550 PP. Personally, I use this car the most at around the 500 PP level. At that level, you can run around the high 390s to low 400 region in terms of power, and hardly any weight compared to what you'd expect a muscle car to weigh. And when you enter an online lobby with this car at that PP level, people automatically assume two things. The first thing they assume is that you're probably going to dominate the straights, which is understandable. The second thing that they usually assume is that you're not going to be very good around corners, and that gives them confidence that they're probably going to be able to beat you overall, especially on tracks such as the Nuremberg Ring, which is by far the track that I used to use this on the most. Ironically though, they're wrong on both counts, because this car goes against both of those stereotypes. For one thing, it's not the fastest of muscle cars in a straight line. In fact, there are plenty of Japanese imports that could outrun it in its respective PP. But it's also not a bad handling car, and can corner extremely well, so it bucks the stereotype in both ways, and that makes it a great track car. Now, although I said it doesn't have the sheer spec of some other models or the sheer straight line performance that you'd expect generally from a muscle car, it's certainly no slouch. It produces 678 horsepower fully tuned, and what was, to me anyway, a surprisingly high 756 pound-feet of torque, which for a 3.8 litre is very impressive. Now, the performance that it gets doesn't set any records in the muscle car category. It does around 225-ish top end, and the acceleration, although good, again, isn't going to beat the majority of muscle cars. However, what this car doesn't have in straight line performance, it more than makes up for in overall track ability, because there's no point in being a straight line missile if you can't take a corner, and that is what this car has to its advantage, because although its top speed may not be as high as some others, its average speed can be much higher, because you lose so much speed with a high powered muscle car constantly changing through the gears and stomping on the brakes for the corners. With this car, you just don't have to do that. There are a number of tracks where you can just flow this car through corners where other muscle cars would have to really slow down for. But this car, thanks to its relatively compact size, especially width, its low weight, and its completely different approach to performance is actually one of the best track-going muscle cars in the game. And interestingly, it also makes a really good NASCAR on the Daytona Oval. Despite having significantly less power and sheer spec than the official NASCARs that are on the game, it's actually faster than the official NASCARs around the Daytona Oval, which is pretty impressive as well. Now, the value for money on this car is very, very good. It only costs 31,000 credits, which makes it nearly the cheapest muscle car in the game. Not quite, but very nearly. So the value for money on this model is fantastic. And if by some chance you haven't tried the GNX before, I would strongly recommend it, to be honest, whether you're a muscle car fan or not, because even if you're not a fan, this car will surprise you by just how good it is around the track. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.